This is an oral history interview with Donald White for the Washington Masonic Library and Museum. We are located in Mr. White's home in Olympia, Washington. My name is Chelsea Hansen, and the date is April 23rd, 2025. Don, could you start by describing how and when you first heard about Freemasonry and what your first impressions were of the fraternity?
Yes, I was probably in early high school and in Orting, Washington. And the Masonic temple at that time was on a two-story building. And they decided they would, because people were getting older, it was harder to walk up those stairs. So they petitioned and got a special dispensation from the Grand Lodge to build the first Masonic temple on the ground floor. And my father, who was good at carpentry, uh, and he was a mason, volunteered to do some work in construction of the building. And after school, I would walk over and also do some work in construction of the building. And I got to know the masons who were working there very well, and it was only natural for me then to petition uh, for the degrees of masonry because I already knew some of the people in the lodge.
Oh, very cool. And so that's when you decided to join Freemasonry?
Yes,
And what particularly drew you to the fraternity?
the camaraderie was what I really enjoyed about masonry.
Okay, awesome. And I know you mentioned this a little bit, but could you talk about your connection to Washington State?
I mean, the state of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was born in Tacoma
Mm-hmm.
and lived on a farm uh, outside of Graham, Washington, and nearby the town of Orting, and lived on a farm my whole life, and until I eventually went away to college and then was on my own.
Awesome. And could you walk me through your involvement in Washington Masonry over the years?
Well, during my 68 years as a Mason, I attended many lodges, and wherever I was um, assigned when I was in the service, I attended lodge in Seoul, Korea, in uh, also in New Mexico, and I just visited lodges wherever I went, and was always welcomed. And what I did was, after I joined the Masons, I learned the three charges. And whenever I went to a lodge, when they were putting on a degree, I would ask the master if they would like somebody to do the charge. And usually they would say yes. And I would then do the charge for whatever degree that they were performing that night.
Hmm. Could you talk a little bit about your military service and how you were involved in Masonry during that time?
Well, I was drafted in 1957, and after basic training in Fort Ord, California, I also got my second 8 weeks in Fort Ord, California as a clerk, clerk typist and clerk, and was sent to Korea, South Korea. And my first job uh, was working in one unit where I was serving as a clerk, but I transferred over to American Forces Korea Radio and Television Network because I had worked in radio and television before I was drafted. And so it was a natural progression for me to serve the rest of my service time in Korea at AFKN TV and radio.
Hmm. And so you mentioned you were involved in the fraternity in Korea.
Yes, I would attend the lodge in Seoul, Korea, and enjoyed that very much because most of the members in the lodge were Americans, and very few Koreans actually were in the lodge. So it was an interesting opportunity to meet more, um, just more people, and as I mentioned earlier, I like the camaraderie part.
Mhm. And did you notice any differences between Washington Masonry and Masonry in Korea?
Very little. The Korean Masonry had was under the Grand Lodge of I think it was New Mexico, and so the work was uh, performed the same as the lodges in the United States, but it was very similar to the Washington work. I mean, it was very little difference.
Oh, interesting. And so when you came back, did you rejoin the lodges that you were a part of previously, or how did that work for you?
I actually began working in radio in a radio station in Aberdeen, and would attend the lodge number 52 in Aberdeen at that time. And wherever I went, and I visited, and never became actual members. I kept my membership in Valley number 71, but I uh, would enjoy visiting the other lodges.
Did you notice the different culture and different lodges in Washington that you visited?
No, not really. I don't think there was any difference in the culture because we're all under the Grand Lodge of Washington in the state of Washington, and the work is all very similar.
Okay. Um, I guess we can move on to more specifically, how did the idea of the Masonic license plate first come about?
I first noticed that there was a special license plate for the square dancers, and I was a square dancer myself, so I did notice that on the license plate there was a picture of a square dancing couple, and I talked at that time to our Sovereign Grand Inspector General Bill Miller about the opportunity to perhaps have a Masonic license plate. And he encouraged me to pursue that. And because I was already in Olympia and working around the legislature with my own job as executive director of the Washington Public Ports Association, I was familiar with procedures of legislation and how a piece of legislation is enacted, and drafted a piece of legislation that included a Masonic license plate language, and I had it checked over by a um, very capable Mason who is also a member of the legislature, and he revised it very slightly, uh, the legislation, and we had it introduced. And the prime sponsor was Senator Mary Margaret Haugen, who is a member of the Order of Eastern Star. And the bill was introduced in the Senate. It passed the Senate without a dissenting vote, but we couldn't get it approved in the House of Representatives. And we tried for several years, always passing the Senate first. And eventually, uh, the House of Representatives did pick it up and passed it, and it was signed into law by Governor Gary Locke. And I remember when he signed the bill, he looked up at me because I was there. He gave me his pen that used for signing the bill and said, "This is for the Masons. It's a very good organization." And I remembered Governor Luck's comments, and I appreciated them.
That's awesome. Can you walk me through? I know you talked about getting it through, but what was your experience of bringing the license plate from an idea to reality?
Well, I think it went along the lines of almost all legislation, and that is, it has to be introduced, sponsored by a member of the legislature, and has to go to a committee, and testimony is public testimony is offered at that time, and eventually that committee will take up the issue of whether they want to pass the bill or not. And in an executive session, it has to receive a majority vote in the committee, and it goes to the Rules Committee. And although usually a testimony is not offered in the Rules Committee, uh, it has to be approved by a majority in the Rules Committee before it can go to the floor of either the House or the Senate. And once it's passed that first House, the same process has to be enacted then in the opposite chamber through the same committee process, Rules Committee, and floor action. So it's very similar to any piece of legislation that passes the legislature.
Did you experience any pushback at any time during the process?
No, I think one of the reasons that we had such support is the prime sponsor was Senator Mary Margaret Haugen, and she was a very respected member of the state Senate and chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. And because of her success as a legislator, it also then helped pass our piece of legislation.
How did you get to working with Senator Mary Haugen? Did you know her personally before?
I knew her because I was also a lobbyist, as I mentioned a minute ago, with the Washington Public Ports Association, and became familiar with many of the legislators. And one of them was Mary Margaret Haugen, that I respected very much. And I had talked with her, I guess, on a number of occasions, and learned that she was a member of the Order of Eastern Star. And because of her familiarity with the fraternity, she was a natural prime sponsor of our legislation.
Wonderful. What were your thoughts after getting the bill passed?
That it was an opportunity for our fraternity to get recognized throughout the state of Washington, and in a very nice way, by displaying the Masonic emblem, the square and compasses, on a license plate. And once people throughout the state of Washington would see that license plate, they would have a favorable feeling towards our fraternity.
Do you remember the first time you saw the Masonic license plate on the road?
I can't remember, but it was, I suspect it was early on in 2020, right after the bill was passed. And the reason for that is that the first license plate was issued to the parade, the Masonic parade float, and the second and third was issued to the Masonic Retirement Center. And then I think 5 or 6 went to our Sovereign Grand Inspector General, Bill Miller, and there's a few people who had felt strongly in support of the measure. Then also, my license plate bill was the 10th one assigned. It was 00010.
Cool. And do you remember some of the reactions from people once the bill was passed, other than yourself?
I think there was general support among my friends in the Masonic fraternity that they supported an opportunity to buy a license plate, and a lot of them did at the very beginning. In recent years, there hasn't been an effort on the part of our Grand Lodge to really promote the Masonic license plate. And I recommend that the Grand Lodge write a letter to every Mason in the state of Washington that spells out the advantages of having a Masonic license plate, and encourage every Mason to have one on their vehicle. And I think the Grand Lodge and the district deputies can do a lot in promoting the I think the acquisition of a Masonic plate among our fraternal members.
And and part of what the license plate is about is that part of the proceeds go to a nonprofit called Helping Kids Speak.
Yes, and that was the real reason behind initially when I approached the idea with Sovereign Grand Inspector General and past Grand Master Bill Miller, that I said this would afford us an opportunity to have some regular annual funds that would go to our childhood language program. And it has. The more recent estimate of income is $50,000 a year is transferred from that account. The account is really in the state treasurer's office. When a license plate is sold, the Department of Licenses deposit the money in an account in the treasurer's office, and on a regular basis, the treasurer then will transfer the funds to the Childhood Language Center.
And were you the one who initially chose the organization these profits would go to? Or what was that decision like?
It was the reason that we worked on establishing the Masonic license plate was to fund the Childhood Language Center. And so there wasn't really a choosing. It was the reason for us to work on establishing a Masonic license plate in the state of Washington.
Gotcha. Is there anything else about the license plate story that you would like to add that I haven't asked?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to display our Masonic relationship that gives an opportunity for every Mason who has a license plate to display the square and compasses to the general public. And some will wonder whether the Grand Lodge is authorizing the use of a square and compass on the license plate. And yes, they did. When I first started working on establishing the plate, I requested by letter the Grand Master to approve the use of the square and compass on the license plate. And he approved the use of the square and compass And I still have that letter. Should anyone ever question whether that's a possible conflict of interest or anything that might raise a question about using the scoring compasses, uh, I have that letter of approval by the Grand Master.
Awesome. Wonderful. Um, and then I guess we can transition to the last portion of questions. More generally, what does Masonry mean to you at this point in your life? And has it changed since you first joined?
I don't believe the fraternity has changed significantly, but what it means to me is that the values that Masonry stand for still are valid today. And the camaraderie is important, but the tenets of Freemasonry are what really is important, and that is brotherly love, relief, and truth. And as long as the fraternity supports those basic elements, the fraternity, I think, will last forever.
Is there anything else you can think of to say about either generally your experience in Freemasonry or, again, the license plate that I haven't asked that you'd like to talk about?
The only thing that I notice is that wherever I go, wherever I travel, I meet Masons and have a bond with them that I don't believe is possible with any other organization, because we all knelt at that same altar and repeated our obligation. And I know that every other Mason uh, repeated those same obligations that I did. And so we have a common bond.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.